10 years after my son died, a man walked back into my life, claiming he deserved a share of everything my boy left behind. He said it calmly, like he was asking for the time of day, and he expected me to surrender. That moment changed the rest of my life. If you've ever had someone cross a line they had no right to touch, tell me your story in the comments. Family stood around the small table we set up each year, sharing stories in low tones. The moment settled into something steady, until footsteps cut through the gathering, and Derek Sloan walked straight toward me as if he belonged there. He didn't wait for anyone to acknowledge him. A folded document dangled from his hand. "Robert," he said loud enough for people nearby to turn, "we should talk about the portion your son left in my name." At first the words didn't land. Then the room shifted, and a few relatives stared at me as if expecting a response. "Found something interesting, a message your son sent to another board member months before the collapse." "What kind of message?" "Short but telling. He wrote that Derek had pushed him to sign adjustments he didn't agree with. Said he felt cornered but didn't want to upset you." A pause followed. The corridor seemed to pull inward as her words settled. "He didn't want to worry his family," she continued. "It's not evidence, but it paints a picture." The message cut deeper than any headline. My son had been struggling and he chose silence. Maybe he thought he could handle it. Maybe he believed I had enough on my plate. Whatever the reason, he carried it alone. "Send me the email," I said. "I already did. There's more. Derek filed supplemental claims this morning. He added a witness." "A witness?" "Someone who claims they saw your son sign the debt agreement. It's vague, but courts entertain vague if it fits a narrative." A long breath escaped before I could stop it. "How does he even find these people?" "Desperation breeds creativity," she replied. "You need to stay steady." Steady. The word sounded foreign. Doubt crept in faster this time. Had I missed signs my son wanted help? Should I have pushed him harder to talk? Each memory replayed in fragments. A distracted look during dinner-canceled plans, a vague excuse about deadlines. None of it felt urgent back then. "Marcia." I said, maybe he really did sign something. Maybe there's a part of this I never saw. Her tone sharpened. "You're spiraling. Stop. If you were going to back out, you would have done it 10 years ago. You're in this because you know something's wrong." She rarely raised her voice, but the firmness steadied me. She let the silence hang a moment before lowering her tone again. "I'm sending you an address. Your son kept a storage unit near Flagstaff throughout the startup years. If there's anything real left behind, it might be there. Why didn't we know about it? People keep things from their families all the time, especially when they're trying to hold a failing company together." Coworkers moved past the corridor talking loudly about weekend barbecues, normal life brushing against a storm only I seemed to feel. The contrast tightened something in my chest. "Should I go today?" "Yes. Before Derek finds another angle." She ended the call, leaving only the hum of equipment in the hall and the faint buzz of fluorescent bulbs overhead. A day earlier, I'd wanted this nightmare to stop. Now ignoring it felt impossible. Every step back only gave Derek room to move forward. Afternoon crept along with no sign of easing. Conversations dipped when I walked past. Someone forwarded me another article, this one featuring the witness who claimed to have seen a meeting outside a cafe years ago. The story painted an image designed to implicate, not illuminate. I gathered my things without waiting for the shift to end. One coworker offered a stiff nod, unsure whether he should speak. Another pretended not to notice me leaving. Neither gesture offered comfort. In the parking lot, the heat clung to the metal railings. The truck door groaned as I opened it. Marcia's text with the Flagstaff address waited on the screen. A pinned map marked a small storage business off a frontage road near the forest line. The storage unit sat at the edge of a gravel lot in Flagstaff, tucked behind a row of dented metal doors. A cold draft passed through the narrow hallway as I unlocked the unit. The latch rattled before giving way. Dust coated nearly every surface. A couple of boxes sat stacked crookedly near the back, along with an old computer tower and cables tossed together without care. Cardboard crumbled slightly when I pulled the first box forward. Folders lay scattered in no particular order: draft contracts, printouts of early business plans, receipts from coffee shops where my son must have worked through long nights. None of it hinted at Derek's story about debt or agreements. The second box held similar clutter, enough to stir old memories but nothing useful. The phone vibrated in my pocket. My attorney's voice came through tight and clipped. "Robert, we have a development. Derek filed for a temporary freeze on part of the estate." My grip tightened around the phone. "A freeze on what grounds?" "He claims you may be transferring funds to avoid a settlement. The court could restrict movement of certain accounts until the case stabilizes." A pulse hammered behind my ribs. "How soon does that start?" "It's already submitted. We'll try to challenge it, but the request alone puts scrutiny on every transaction. Be prepared for interruptions." A few seconds passed before words returned. "So he's trying to box me in." "Yes. This is the hardest swing he's taken so far." The call ended with a promise to update me once the judge responded. I stayed still for a moment, the phone hanging loosely in my hand. Derek had finally managed to push me into a corner. Not only did he want the money, he wanted the court to assume I had something to hide. Sifting through the files again felt pointless. Each sheet turned over brought a sense of sinking deeper into something I never chose. Losing my son had already carved out enough of me. Now Derek was dragging his memory through one legal trap after another, as though grief made me an easy target. The drive back to the front of the unit felt heavier than the boxes. A light scatter of cold dust drifted across the lot as the wind picked up. Pebbles pinged against the metal walls, giving the air a restless, unsettled rhythm. Snow hadn't started, but the temperature hinted at it. I loaded the folders into the truck, stacking them neatly, even though they barely offered direction. One last box sat by the entrance, a torn one I'd ignored earlier. The side had split open, exposing old notebooks and loose cables. Kneeling down, I lifted a folder, sending a small cloud of dust swirling. Beneath the stack, something metallic glinted faintly. A small metal container rested at the bottom, wedged between papers. Its surface was dented at the corner, the latch slightly rusted. The size reminded me of a keepsake box, not typical storage for business documents. The latch on the metal box gave way after a firm press. A small flash drive lay tucked beneath a couple of folded notes, the handwriting unmistakably my son's. Some lines trailed off mid-thought, as if written during moments he meant to revisit but never did. One note read, "If anything happens, someone needs to know what he tried to do." Another simply listed dates, no context, no explanation. The drive felt almost weightless in my hand, yet its meaning carried far more heft than any file I had found so far. I placed everything back in the box and headed for Phoenix without stopping. Marcia met me at her office after hours. She didn't ask many questions, just took the drive and plugged it into her laptop. The machine whirred before producing a directory filled with scrambled file names. "Encrypted," she said, leaning closer. "Let me run a few tools." Lines of code scrolled as she worked. A handful of files unlocked. Short audio clips appeared, first labels like Day 17 and Late Call 2. She clicked one. My son's voice poured from the speakers, strained, exhausted. "He wants new terms. Keeps saying the company won't survive without restructuring. I don't know what he's planning anymore. I'm trying to stay ahead of him." The recording cut off abruptly. Another file opened to the same unsettled tone. He pushed again today. Said I'd regret it if I stalled. I'm documenting this in case... Static filled the rest. Marcia stopped the playback. There's enough here to show he feared Derek's intentions. Not enough to end the case, but enough to understand the pattern. Hearing him again unraveled something I had fought to hold together. During those months, he'd insisted everything was under control. A few dinners came back to me, nights when he answered questions with clipped phrases brushing off any concern. I hadn't pressed. I'd told myself he deserved space to handle his work the way he wanted. Robert, Marcia said softly, guilt's going to chase you if you let it. He hid this because he wanted to protect you, not because you failed him. There wasn't a reply fit for that moment, so none came. She continued scanning the files while I stepped aside to steady myself. The recordings kept looping in my head, his voice trying to document what he couldn't bring himself to say out loud. Each fragment underlined how far Derek had gone long before the lawsuit. By morning, the recordings had already leaked into the background of my day. At work, several co-workers greeted me with awkward half-grins. Didn't think an estate dispute could get that dramatic, one of them muttered. Another chimed in, hope you've got a good PR team. That guy is everywhere right now. Their attempts at humor scraped nerves already worn thin. Derek had hired a media-savvy lawyer, and articles now framed me as a stubborn father clinging to a fortune meant for someone else. Headlines speculated about my motives. Comments online accused me of greed. During lunch, a colleague approached with concern, disguised as curiosity. Is it true you're blocking the guy from what he's owed? The question lingered long after the conversation died. Each remark chipped away at my resolve. That evening, as I watered a few potted plants along the porch gravel shifted near the driveway, Derek opened the paper and tapped the top line like he was presenting a receipt. He owed me millions and we made an arrangement. This is the agreement he signed. The tone carried a strange mix, half challenge, half pity, as if he believed he was doing me a favor by warning me early. My jaw tightened. You picked one hell of a moment, I said. This is the moment, he replied. You've held his estate for a decade. I'm done waiting for my share. A few family members stepped back, avoiding eye contact. Derek kept talking, spinning his story with the confidence of someone who thought he'd cornered me. He lifted the paper again. I'll give you a chance to settle this without dragging us both through court. But if you'd rather force my hand, I'll file in Phoenix this week. The edges of the document trembled in his fingers, not from fear, more like excitement. He believed he had the upper hand. Derek stood at the end of the walkway, hands in his pockets, posture overly casual. We need to talk, he called out. No, we don't. He stepped closer, lowering his tone. You know what's real here, Robert. Don't drag this out. You're making things harder than they have to be. A faint smirk touched his face, as if he believed he had already won. Be smart, he said. You don't want me pushed into a corner. The plants still dripped water when I turned and walked back to the door. He continued talking until the hinges creaked shut behind me. No shouting, no threats, just enough pressure to stain every thought. The audio file opened with a sharp click, followed by my son's strained voice. He brought another set of papers today. Says the company won't make payroll without a restructuring. He keeps pushing these equity changes. I told him I needed time and he snapped. A muffled crash sounded. Then Derek's voice cut through, harsh, unmistakable. Sign it. I'm not asking again. My son inhaled shakily. This isn't what we agreed to. You can't force... Derek interrupted his tone, rising. You either sign that adjustment or you're out. I'm done pretending we're equals. The file ended with a scrape and a thud like a chair shoved aside. Marcia didn't speak for a long moment. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before she clicked another recovered item, a corrupted video file blinking with a restoration tag. After a few attempts, an image formed. The frame shook slightly as if my son had propped his phone against something. Derek paced in front of him, agitated voice cutting through the static. "Kiss the paperwork and move on. If you don't, I'll make sure you disappear from this project altogether." He jabbed a finger toward the camera. "Sign it or you're done. I'm not rescuing you anymore." My son's face barely showed, but his breathing filled the microphone, thin, uneven. The clip ended abruptly when Derek turned toward the device and reached for it. Marcia exhaled slowly. "This is the break we needed. It's not perfect, but it puts him in a corner." The hope rising in my chest felt jagged. Seeing my son prepare for the possibility of betrayal opened something raw. He had been too young to shoulder that kind of pressure, yet he planned for the moment Derek might turn on him. Planned, but never sent anything to the police. Never told me. Never warned anyone. A part of me wanted to cling to the relief that he'd foreseen trouble. Another part sagged under the knowledge that he'd fought alone. Marcia continued working through the files while messages started buzzing across my phone. A coworker texted a link to another article. Derek's new attorney framed me as a manipulative parent, twisting the narrative. Comments questioned my integrity, speculated about hidden motives. A second message popped up my niece. "Uncle Robert, why are you dragging his partner's name through the mud? He helped your son more than anyone." Then a call, a different relative. "Robert, Derek reached out. He says you're inventing things. He sounds devastated. Are you sure you're doing the right thing?" Hearing doubt in their voices chipped away whatever strength I'd gathered from the video. Derek understood exactly where to strike. He knew my family leaned toward giving people the benefit of the doubt. He fed them a story where he was the abandoned friend, the one trying to honor a dead partner, while I supposedly rewrote history. When the calls finally slowed, Marcia glanced at me. "He knows you found something. That's why he's flooding the court with fake exhibits. He's trying to bury your evidence under noise." The urge to walk away, to simply let the legal system chew through whatever remained, rose stronger than before. "I don't want my son dragged through headlines," I muttered. "If you don't use the video, he will drag him anyway," she said. "Only difference is you'll be unarmed." Her tone wasn't harsh, just matter-of-fact, like someone pointing out the direction of a storm already forming. Another email arrived from my attorney. Derek petitioned for expedited testimony. "Court may summon you sooner than expected. We need definitive evidence on file before that happens." The thought of sitting in a courtroom while Derek twisted the pieces of my son's life into a weapon made my stomach knot. Every time I pictured the video being replayed for strangers, something tightened behind my ribs. It felt wrong, too invasive, like sharing a confession never meant for me to hear in the first place. Marcia closed the laptop, folded her hands, and studied my expression. "Robert, listen to me. He left that video because he knew you might need it. Your son wasn't naive. He prepared for this exact situation." "Maybe, but he didn't send it to the police. People wait too long to ask for help," she said. "He trusted you to do what he couldn't finish." Silence stretched a moment. Not comfortable. Just heavy. My attorney entered the room carrying a stack of printed motions. His gaze shifted from me to Marcia. "We need to decide soon. The judge could review Derek's request anytime this week." He spoke with the steady tone of someone used to high-pressure cases, but even he seemed tense. Marcia placed the USB gently on the desk between us, not pushing, not demanding, just setting the choice where I had to see it. My chair eased back as I lowered myself into it, the weight of the decision pressing against my shoulders. The recording still echoed in my ears, my son breathing hard, trying to hold himself together while Derek threatened him. Marcia waited. The attorney waited. The USB remained in the center of the table, small and silent. My attorney spread several documents across the conference table, while Marcia placed the USB beside them. No one spoke at first. The decision had already been made when I walked through the door. The only task left was to carry it out. "We'll submit the recordings today," my attorney said. "Once they're logged as evidence, the court must consider them." Marcia folded her arms. "He won't back down. Expect a noise." "Noise won't change the truth," I answered, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. The fear of exposing my son's final months hadn't vanished, but something in me shifted. Protecting him didn't mean burying what he fought against. It meant finishing what he couldn't. Later that morning, Derek held what he called a public conversation outside a community center in Phoenix. Reporters gathered around while he waved new documents claiming they proved I'd been intimidating him. Clips circulated across social feeds, him gesturing wildly, describing himself as a man betrayed twice, first by my son, now by me. Marcia watched one of the broadcasts with a low exhale. He's losing control. Desperation always leaks through. The courthouse felt colder than usual when we arrived. My attorney checked us in, then handed the USB to the clerk. Within minutes, a prosecutor called for a preliminary review. Derek arrived late, flanked by his attorney. He scanned the room, spotted me, and smirked, as if he still had leverage. Proceedings began with routine questions. Then the prosecutor addressed the judge. "We have newly submitted digital media believed to contain statements from the deceased partner documenting coercive actions by Mr. Sloan. We request authentication and analysis." Murmurs spread across the courtroom. Derek stiffened. When the first audio clip played, his attorney objected immediately. "This is incomplete. Context is missing. My client's voice is not identifiable." The judge raised a hand. "Objection noted. The court will evaluate after expert review." Another clip followed. Derek shifted, muttering to his attorney. A bead of sweat collected near his collar. The prosecutor advanced to the video, the one showing him threatening my son. Marcia's gaze fixed on Derek, while the analyst confirmed the restoration process. When the audio came through, "Sign it or you're done," a hush fell over the room. Derek broke first. "That recording's doctored," he shouted. His attorney tugged at his sleeve, whispering sharply, but Derek continued. "He's framing me. They built that file to destroy my case." The judge warned him to remain seated. Then came the twist none of us expected. The timing of the forensics specialist stepped forward with a printed summary. The video metadata aligns with an official company email sent by Mr. Sloan on the same date and hour. The sender IP and timestamp confirm he was present at the office location where the recording appears to have occurred. No indication of tampering has been detected. Derek's mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. His attorney stared at the document, speechless. The prosecutor pressed on. To clarify, the defendant claimed the agreement in question was signed months prior to this recording. The data suggests the conversation about forcing the signature occurred afterward. This contradiction undermines his sworn statements. For a moment, everything held still, not tense, just suspended. Then Derek lunged for the table, pointing at me. "He forged it. He manipulated those files with that investigator woman. I know what they're doing." The judge slammed the gavel. "Mr. Sloan, any further outbursts will result in contempt. Given these discrepancies, I'm ordering an immediate criminal inquiry into potential fraud and perjury." His attorney sagged in his chair. He talked about responsibility, debt, loyalty, as though he'd been the one left to bury a child. "You're claiming he gave you rights to his assets. Not claiming, confirming," he said. "You've been holding on to money that was never yours to keep." Anger pushed against my ribs, but letting it out here would only turn the memorial into a spectacle. My sister whispered my name, urging calm. Derek mistook the restraint for weakness. "Think about it, Robert. I'm prepared to bring everything forward." He placed the document on the table right beside my son's photo, then stepped back. I'll expect to hear from you. No apology. No acknowledgement of the moment he'd broken. He simply turned and walked out, leaving a few stunned faces behind. The conversation faded, but the tension stayed. People drifted away, unsure whether to ask questions or keep their distance. My hand reached for the paper. The texture felt brittle, like something handled too many times. Reporters scribbled. The gallery murmured. Through it all, I remained seated, watching. Not triumphant, just aware of the shift taking place, as if the ground beneath Derek finally gave way. Security officers approached. Derek's breathing turned erratic. This is a setup. He's lying. He's been lying since the day his son died. No one responded. Even his attorney avoided his eyes. The judge instructed the officers, and they guided him towards the door. Papers scattered from his grip as he tried to argue with them, but his words dissolved into fragmented accusations. Marcia leaned toward me. "It's over," she whispered. Not victory, just acknowledgement. I stayed still, a kind of stillness born from years of holding everything together without letting anything spill. Derek's voice echoed down the hall as the officers pulled him into the waiting area. A clerk guided me into a small records room behind the courtroom. The fluorescent hum filled the space as he slid a stack of forms across the desk. "Sign here to confirm transfer of the digital evidence," he said. I read each line, then signed. The flash drive and the metal box sat between us, tagged and logged, no longer mine to hold. A strange calm settled over the moment. Not relief, not victory. Just the fatigue of someone who'd walked through every corner of grief and finally reached the exit. The clerk collected the items. "Anything else you need today, Mr. Hale?" "No," I said. "That's everything." The hallway felt long as I left the room. For years I'd believed silence kept the peace, letting things pass, avoiding conflict, trusting that restraint would protect the people I loved. Yet that same silence had invited Derek to rewrite the truth. It offered him room to step closer, cross boundaries, and claim what never belonged to him. That realization carried its own sting, but it felt steady too, like something I'd been circling for a long time without naming. My attorney caught up with me near the elevator. "It's moving quickly now," he said. "Federal prosecutors are taking over. Fraud, document forgery, extortion. He won't be able to file anything else in civil court." "Good," I replied. The word came out even without triumph. A few minutes later, Marcia found us. "They're preparing to transport him," she said. "Looks like the charges will stick." She didn't smile. Neither did I. Justice doesn't always invite celebration. Sometimes it just closes a door. We stepped outside together, stopping near the curb, where cars moved in slow loops through the traffic pattern. She studied my expression before speaking. "You handled this the only way it could be handled," she said. "I waited too long to speak up," I answered. "You spoke when it counted." Her voice carried no sympathy, just truth. That mattered more. Derek passed through the lobby under guard as we stood outside. He didn't look at me. His shoulders hunched forward as if his body had finally accepted what his mind kept fighting. No words were exchanged, no parting shot, no plea. Just the end of a man who mistook my restraint for weakness. I didn't follow him. I didn't need to. The following week, life at Salt River Project resumed in its familiar rhythm. My supervisor adjusted my schedule without comment, giving me lighter hours and longer weekends. No one brought up the lawsuit. Curiosity faded fast once headlines moved on. On a Saturday morning, I drove north toward Sedona to meet a beginners hiking group. It was something I'd put off for years, first because of the estate, then because grief made everything else feel secondary. The trail they chose wasn't difficult. but it demanded enough focus to pull my thoughts back into my body. Step after step, the ground felt steadier. Later that day, while I refilled my water bottle at the trailhead, the phone buzzed. Marcia's name appeared. "Thought you'd want to know," she said. "The investigation is closed on your end. They won't need any more statements." "Thank you." "Take care of yourself," she added, then hung up. No long conversation, no debrief, just a clean ending. Driving back toward Scottsdale, the road curved through the red cliffs and open stretches of desert. A scenic turnout appeared ahead, one I'd passed countless times but never stopped at. This time I slowed. The air felt different up there. I stepped out the landscape, spreading below in layered shades of rust and ochre. The metal box rested on the passenger seat. I brought it with me to the stone barrier overlooking the valley. My hand settled on the lid, not gripping, not holding on. Just resting. So much of the past decade had felt like guarding a wound, one I didn't know how to let breathe. Yet standing there, the view wide and unbroken, the weight of that box finally began to shift. Cars came and went behind me. A family laughed near their parked SUV. Someone took a photo. Life moved around me without asking anything in return. The breeze passed across the ridge. I kept my hand on the box a moment longer, then let it fall to my side as I turned back toward the truck. Lines of fake certainty ran down the page, and his signature, my son's, sat at the bottom. Whether it was forged or coerced, I couldn't tell yet. The drive home after the memorial felt longer than usual. A stack of mail waited by the door, and one envelope marked from a federal clerk carried a message I didn't want to read. Derek had already filed his lawsuit. A formal notice stated that he was petitioning the U.S. District Court in Phoenix for contractual entitlement to my son's estate. Before I finished the page, the phone rang. My cousin's name flashed. "Is any of this true?" she asked. Her voice held no accusation, but the hesitation stung more than anger ever could. "What part?" "The debt, the agreement. People are talking. Maybe he left something out, something you didn't share with us." Another call buzzed in before we hung up. A different relative, same tone, same insinuation. Years of holding the family steady didn't stop them from sliding into suspicion within a day. Every question circled around the money, not the truth. Comments like, "Maybe you're protecting his memory too hard," or "$42 million is a lot for one person to manage," started slipping in. By the next morning, the news had reached my workplace. Salt River Project wasn't a place where gossip spread fast, yet a few co-workers stepped aside when I walked in, unsure of what they should say. One of them approached with a half smirk. "Saw your name in an online article. Didn't know you were sitting on that kind of fortune." He meant it as a joke, but the words landed wrong. The estate never felt like fortune. It felt like a gravestone I had to carry. My shift dragged on, every conversation strained, every break weighed down by people muttering just softly enough that they could claim innocence. In the afternoon, my attorney called and told me to meet him in Mesa. He wanted me to sit with an investigator he trusted. The office sat on a second floor, above a small insurance agency. Nothing impressive, but the kind of place people used when they wanted answers more than presentation. A woman stepped into the conference room, introduced herself as Marcia Torres, and asked for the document Derek had dropped at the memorial. She studied the pages with a speed that signaled experience, not carelessness. A pen tapped lightly on the corner as she scanned dates and signatures. "Look here," she said, angling the paper. "This timestamp doesn't match Arizona's filing format from that year, and this corporate seal was discontinued before your son's company ever existed." She pointed to another section. "And this line uses a revision code the state didn't adopt until 2 years after this thing was supposed to be signed. Amateur mistakes, but dangerous if no one checks." Her tone stayed neutral, though the message sharpened the weight on my shoulders. Someone had gone through the trouble of crafting a document he thought would stand up in federal court. How bad can this get? She lowered the pen. If he started with forged papers, he won't stop there. Expect escalation. He'll push the story through public channels to pressure you. People like him lean on attention when evidence doesn't hold. The comment wasn't cruel. It was honest, maybe too honest, but honesty was what I needed. A part of me wanted to ask why my son had ever trusted Derek. Another part knew the answer wouldn't change anything. Marcia closed the folder. You have a strong position, but you'll need to brace for noise. Once he starts talking to reporters, the narrative can spin fast. She held my gaze without flinching. Something about her steadiness reminded me that staying passive had its own cost. Derek wasn't just attacking a bank balance, he was clawing at my son's name. My attorney stepped in to discuss next steps, though the details blurred together. Depositions, evidence logs, early motions, terms I had heard before but never wanted to revisit. Grief had already rewritten enough chapters in my life. Now the legal system threatened to cut into whatever remained. Walking out of the office, the sun had dipped behind the buildings, leaving a faint orange strip fading across the sky. The phone buzzed again. A message from a colleague read, "You should see this." A link followed. Derek had reached a local reporter. The headline claimed he'd been betrayed by a former business partner's family and had waited a decade for justice. His quotes painted him as a patient friend pushed to the brink, someone forced to come forward because I refused to acknowledge his sacrifice. Another notification arrived. Then another. A cluster of co-workers gathered near the break table when I walked in. Their eyes bounced from a phone screen to me, then back again. One of them lowered his voice, though not enough. "That article says your son left a pile of debt behind," he murmured to another. Another added, "Reporter claims you've been hiding it for years." The chatter thinned when I stepped closer, but their glances lingered. Derek had offered the paper a story, a dramatic tale of a young entrepreneur drowning in loans betrayed by those closest to him. None of it matched the son I knew, yet the public always prefers a tragedy with a villain already assigned. Emails piled up through the morning. A supervisor pulled me aside. "Maybe take a personal day," he suggested, trying to sound supportive. "Things are getting uncomfortable around here." By noon, the weight of attention drained any attempt at focus. Then the phone buzzed. Marcia's name appeared. "Where are you?" she asked. "At work," I said. "Step somewhere you can talk for a minute." I ducked into a service corridor rarely used except during outages. She didn't waste time. "I've been digging through old corporate archives,"